Okay. Okay. Maybe I'm missing this post to say please confirm the vote if you are live, we are live.
Okay.
Something, everyone's following.
Okay. So, I'm going to just remind you to
Maybe we're okay.
All right. All right, good evening, everyone. Hope that I get away from people out there on Zoom and make sure you can hear me. I don't see anybody waving. Can people out on Zoom hear me? Okay, I see some nods. Okay, thank you. We're going to call this meeting to order. It is a couple minutes past 6:30. I'd like to open this meeting with a pledge of allegiance. So those in the room, please join me.
Hey, Bob, I think you're pretty faint.
Okay, I'll see what I can do. I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
So for those of you out on the Zoom, the best way to hear this is to log into the live stream, which I posted a link and I'll do it again in the chat. But other than that, for public comment, we'll take it here.
Okay. Are there any agenda adjustments? Maybe you can hear me better now? Are there any agenda adjustments?
I have none.
And I have none. So we'll move on to 2.1. Entertain a motion to approve the minutes of July 29th, 2020 Board of Directors Organizational Meeting.
So moved.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. Any discussion, any comments, corrections? Seeing none, then all those in favor? We do have 3 board members that are on Zoom. If we can have each of them let us know
Great.
how they vote.
Andrea?
Approved.
Okay. Dory? Dory,
She's on mute.
you're muted.
Hi, sorry, I'm having difficulty hearing.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you, Dory.
Okay, can you see me?
Yes.
Okay, well, I cannot see any of you.
That's why if you go to the live stream, Dory, the link's in the chat, you'll be able to see into the room and participate through this function here.
Okay. How do I get to the live stream?
I just posted it in the chat. So do you approve the minutes, Dory?
Yes, I have. I've read them. I approved them.
And Joan?
Yeah, I've got them right here.
Joan, how do you vote on the minutes?
I think we lost Joan. Okay,
All right.
we have enough votes to pass it.
Yes. Yep.
Petitions and communications?
I have none this evening.
Okay, move on to superintendent's report.
So most of what I'll talk about is coming later. But at this point, we've been working hard on some planning. The administrative team has been meeting a lot. We've met with the ad hoc committees, and like I said, we'll take you through all that later on. Other than that, the audit is complete, correct, Scott?
We've got just a few loose ends to tie up.
Okay.
That should be done this week.
And Scott and I have been working on the coronavirus relief funds application. We got that in this week, and it's been approved, so that's good. So all in all, it's been a busy few weeks.
Okay. We have one resignation.
Yep. Amy Mayhew, librarian at Carrie Ricker.
Okay. Kathy, Director is CAI report.
Everything I'm reporting out tonight is heading up, or is coming, so we're just gonna wait.
So her comments are everything she has to report is coming up under the discussion of school opening. So we have no other reports tonight.
Nope, done.
Okay. So I want to lay out, the next thing we're going to get to is comments from the floor, public comment period. So let me, for those of you who may have not attended one of our board meetings in the past, this particular section right here is for members of the public to make comments about the school workings, things in the school. You're not entitled to talk derogatorily about a particular staff member or a student. Those types of things have to go through the proper chain to keep confidentiality, which is required. But you can talk and comment on school items. Many of you are probably listening in because of the school opening plan, which has its own item. It has been the practice of the board for, I think, as long as I've been on the board, to allow the public to speak on items that come up that have a possibility that public comment would be made. But in doing that, the board is usually sees the presentation, the board asks questions, gets the information that the board needs from the presentation, and then we will allow the community members to make comments or ask questions for a period of time. And it may cause more conversation by the board for follow-up, but then if it's a motion for action, then the board will have to take action. So there's really two things tonight that might do that. One's the discussion of the opening plan, and that is where once the discussion has been done by the board, we'll open it up for public comments. Anybody that wants to go and speak to what the discussion kind of leads us to will be given that opportunity. Within reason, I have to say, if we have 500 people and are all saying the same thing, we have to kind of keep it short. So it could be a limitation. If somebody's already made the point, making it again might be not necessary, but we're going to do the most that we can. We're going to allow for public comment. And that's how we try and run our board meetings, to allow the public to be involved. Once that's done, then we're going to move into a motion for a reopening plan, which will probably be what we resulted in our discussion of what it would be. So it would be basically a motion to approve what has been agreed upon under discussion that we would do. I don't see that there's another opportunity necessary there for more public comment because we've already had that. All right. And then we will continue on, whether that's approved or not, then we will continue on with the business. I would hope that we do come up with some sort of plan that's agreed upon tonight so that our staff and the community members can begin the planning process and have a kind of a path on where we're going to go. But as in all things, you never know for sure until it's happened. So that's where we're going to be. So right now, I'd like to open it up for public comments. At this time, I would prefer that the public comments, I can't restrict them, but I would prefer the comments at this time be about something other than our school reopening plan. There's the ability to raise your hand in Zoom.
Or the chat.
Or the chat. So if you would use those tools, we will recognize each person that wants to make a comment.
have anybody at this time.
Okay, so right now, we're not showing anybody raising their hand or in the chat to make a comment under this particular section. I'll give it just another little bit of time because of technology lag, et cetera, and then we'll move on. Still none?
Not at this point.
Okay, then we'll move into, we have no old business to discuss tonight. So we'll go into new business. So 6.1 is a presentation on the return to school plan. This is the plan that's being recommended by the CPT committee that met based upon all the subcommittee and also following the requirements that are set forth for us by the Department of Education, both state and nationally. So, Kathy, are you going to make the presentation?
Andy and I are gonna do it
We're
together.
gonna do it together.
We're tag
Okay.
teaming.
So I'm gonna share my screen. For those of you out there in Zoom, I'm gonna share my screen so you can see this, and then when it comes time to comment, I will pull it back. All right, so I will start. I have to tell you, I have, yeah. So,
If you slide present, then they can see just the whole slide. Slideshow. slide presentation.
all right, so, I will say to all of you, my job as your superintendent is to advise you on things. In my 17 plus years of education experience, I have never been in a place where I am right now where I don't know what the right answer is. I just don't. And I hate to say that, but I think it has to be said. I see a lot of people talking that they know exactly what needs to happen. I don't know that. I think the work that you're about to see is good work. I think a lot of work has gone into it. But at the end of the day, I can't tell you without a shadow of a doubt what's going to happen a week from now, what's going to happen a month from now, what's even going to happen tomorrow. But tonight, what you're tasked to do is decide how we're going to reopen. The Department of Education says we have three options: 100% in-person instruction. But regardless of what we do for any in-person instruction, there are requirements that the DOE has before we can open. So the choices are 100% in-person instruction, a hybrid model where some students are in, some students are out, or 100% remote learning. I can tell you, and I will preface this with, 100% in-person instruction is not possible in our students. We just cannot meet the requirements of the DOE. We'll get to this in the slides, but I think you need to know that going in. And I think the general public needs to hear that. Just the physical distancing components alone, we don't have the space to do across the district. And so consequently, we're going to show you a hybrid plan. We've done remote learning. We know how to do it. It needs some tweaks, but we'll talk about that as well. So beyond that, I think, Kathy, if you want to start.
Okay, so I'm going to start by talking about the timeline of events that we've been doing all through the summer. So the students got out of school on June 5th, and that following Monday, our staff started to do some PD days, and they were tasked to think of some planning scenarios for the fall. And we gave them some different criteria: attendance, engagement, health and safety. And we asked them to give us feedback on 3 different models: in-person, hybrid, and remote. And that information was really valuable for us to make decisions about how this could look and sound like to make sure that opening of school is safe. On the week of June 15th, the DOE gave us our first guidance. Throughout the summer, they have updated it, and we've gotten even a new update this week. The week of June 22nd, we surveyed our families and our stakeholders. We got some information from them asking for feedback of how did the spring go and some suggestions, concerns, or how they would like to see the reopening look. At that point, we made some ad hoc committees. So the DOE had created their guidance in 5 different categories. We made 4 ad hoc committees out of those. 2 of them were academic, and so we combined 1 ad hoc committee to tackle 2 of those sections. During the week of June 29th through July 17th, the ad hoc committees met and went over the 55-page document that we created based on that DOE guidance. The ad hoc committees examined what our C4's capacity was to meet those guidance pieces. They made recommendations to the district collaborative planning team. That team met and went over all of the pieces of the first round of guidance. We updated the board in the beginning or the mid-July at that board meeting, and we started our to-do list to make sure that we were prepared to start no matter if we were in-person, hybrid, or remote. By the week of July 27th through August 3rd, the state gave us a green designation. We'll talk a little bit about that. Andy and I, as well as the administrators, have met with some regional teams. We meet with something called WMEC, which is Western Maine Education Collaborative. There are other districts that are rural, that are about our similar size. So we talk about how can we go about processing and planning and brainstorming and thinking outside the box to make sure we are hitting the criteria. We also meet with the region that our students send to LRTC. So Lewiston, Auburn, Poland, and Cannon Falls and such. We also took on the task of calling our parents. We have tried to call all 1,400 students. So I say students, but we really called the family. So if we called the family and they had 3 students, we only called once. We were successful for the most part. There are still some unanswered questions. There was some students or families that we did not get a hold of, whether the information was not updated or we couldn't leave a message. We did post on through email and social media for them to contact us with the information, and we did gather some more information from those. The CPT team met last Friday to kind of go over this last scenario. For us, as educators, it is a default to know how to teach in person. We're very good at teaching in person. Fortunately for RSU4, we actually did remote learning pretty well. Our survey results from our families were pretty pleased. Was it the best case scenario? Absolutely not. Is that our preferred way of teaching? Absolutely not. But we actually did a fairly good job. And so it gives us some groundwork is done, and so we don't have to throw the baby with the bathwater out. We can just tweak some things. For example, our parents didn't want us to do instruction in the afternoon. It was clear that if we were to do remote learning, we would do it in the morning. So all of those things came out of the survey, great feedback. So we feel like, as a CPT team, that we knew what remote learning could look and sound like as well. So the hybrid tonight that we're presenting is really the gray area. What does that look like? Because it's a combination. So we're going to kind of spell that out a little bit more, but we have some other criteria that we want to talk about. So there's a lot of talk about the color designation. And I just want to be clear that the colors that we're going to get, our first color was July 31st. And if you've been following along, the entire state became green. But the green color is just a recommendation. So as we go throughout the year, if our color in our counties, remember, because RSU4 is part of both Androscoggin and Kennebec, if those colors change, it is a recommendation for the school to make that move. Green means 100% in-school learning, yellow means a hybrid learning approach, and red means 100% online learning. So if there's a change, then it would be up to the board to determine if RSU4 would make any adjustments to the plan. So this part is the recommendation part, but the next few pieces that we're going to talk about are the requirements. And so there's a big difference. So if we're talking about color, recommendation, safety requirements are the safety requirements that we need in order to open up for in-person learning.
All right, so to do in-person instruction, the department set 6 safety requirements that a school district must meet in order to consider bringing in students for in-person instruction. These, and we're going to go through them here, but I think it's really important that when we talk about the color designation system, it's a recommendation, and the recommendation meaning we have to meet these 6 requirements to meet the recommendation. So let me just move my slide. The first one, symptom screening before coming to school. Okay, so we must have all our staff self-check themselves every day before they come to school. So we will have. We're actually exploring an app right now potentially, but we will have at least a Google form that our staff have to fill out every day. Our parents will be tasked with running through a symptom checklist as well at home before their students can enter our buses or our buildings. Also with that is we must scan every person's temperature when they walk through the door. And so consequently, I started thinking about how are we going to do that? We have school nurses, but they have so much to do, asking them to stand outside the door and scan the forehead of every person that ran through, did not seem like a valuable use of their time to me. And B, what happens when we get somebody with a high temperature and they have to go? It just didn't make sense, nor did it make sense to take a staff member to do that, partially because of physical distancing requirements, and because the reality is to have students in our buildings right now, we're going to need all hands on deck. I cannot put staff, take staff out of working with students and working on making sure students have masks, making sure that they are physically distant to scan temperature. So Glenn and I actually went and demoed some technology, and with the coronavirus relief funds, we'll be installing infrared scanners that scan the temperature of every single person that walks through our door. So the person walks through the door, they look up, they pause for about a half a second, it records a face, it records a temperature. It actually takes the temperature in the corners of the eyes. Glenn can speak to it as well. It's probably one of the most amazing pieces of technology I've ever seen. I didn't even know such a thing existed. So those will be mounted. We're using coronavirus relief funds to pay for those. So those are not coming out of the general budget. They're actually the federal government is paying for it. Those will be installed over the course of the next 2 weeks. Yeah. So those will be in place.
I'd also like for you to point to confirm. It is not doing facial recognition.
No.
If it sees a high temperature, it takes that picture. That image gets sent to the building administrator, the school nurse, so that they can then say, oh yeah, that's little Tammy. And so they can go get Tammy and do the follow-up. So there is no facial recognition. We're not maintaining that type of stuff. So I want to make sure that that's clear. And so that people who might be concerned about that, as I would be, don't have to worry about it.
That's a great point, Bob. Thank you.
So the second safety requirement is physical distancing. And physical distancing is an important practice that helps mitigate the transmission of the virus. There's no precise threshold for safety, but our studies have shown that physical distancing of 3 feet or more leads to the reduction of the transmission. So adults must stay 6 feet away from others, while students can maintain 3 feet distance amongst each other. So 6 feet though is required for physical distancing for students while eating breakfast or lunch, or where they can't wear a mask, such as outside. We do have adequate, Andy can talk about the ventilation piece that's required for classrooms. But we've worked on grouping our students in one area, classrooms that don't exceed our size limits. So if you want to look at our chart, this is the easiest chart to think about. What is our physical distancing? So no person, individual, student, or staff can be 0 to 3 feet. It's not allowed. 3 to 6 feet, everyone, all students and staff must wear a mask. We will have scheduled mask breaks, and we started to talk about that. And greater than 6 feet, outside and such, we can have a mask break. In our school facilities, we started to remove furniture and materials that are not necessary to make extra room to ensure that our desks could be at least 3 feet apart. We have ordered and we will be installing plexiglass for tables and in our office areas in front of our administrative assistants. We started to work on traffic flow to ensure that certain stairways and hallways are going in one direction. Middle school and high school students will not be using lockers. We will not have gatherings of more than 50 people, and we'll limit the movement around the building, such as during class time transitions, or we will create pods of students and move the teachers, not the students. As you heard, we will be requiring all students and staff entering a building to wear a mask. If you have a certain medical condition, you can get permission to wear a shield.
Kathy, just for a second.
Yep.
I think it's really important. I know masks have become some sort of a political thing in the world right at the moment. I think it's really important to note that we don't make that call. That is not a call that we made. That is a call that the Department of Education and State have made. So wearing a mask being mandatory to do in-person instruction, that isn't a local decision that can be changed. We do in-person instruction, everyone has to wear a mask for the DOE.
Yeah, so masks and face coverings will be worn also by students on the bus. Face shields may be an alternative for students documented with medical or behavior challenges who aren't able to wear masks or face coverings. This same applies to staff with medical or other health reasons being unable to wear face coverings. Face shields worn in place of face coverings must extend below the chin and back to the ears. And you will notice that there will be more guidance that we will send out for parents about what is an acceptable mask. So one without a ventilator, no gaiters, must have 2 layers of protection. Those things must cover the nose and the mouth area, are all requirements of what constitutes a good face covering. The 4th safety requirement is hand hygiene. All students and staff in the school will receive a training in proper hand hygiene. I will say that this is not something that we've always done this. When it comes to cold and flu, we teach how to cough, how to sneeze, and how to wash our hands. However, this is something we typically do in the pre-K-5 world. It's not necessarily something we reinforce in the 6-12, but it is something that we will continue to train and encourage, that we must wash hands or use sanitation gel upon entering the school, before and after eating, before or after donning or removing a face mask, after using the restroom, before and after using the playgrounds or shared equipment, and upon entering or exiting the school bus. Hand washing is the best option, but when we can't, we will use sanitizing gel. We have sanitation. We have sinks with hand soap in all our pre-K-5 classrooms. We also have put hand sanitizers in all our classrooms as well, and sanitation stations in the common areas, such as building entrances, cafeteria, hallways, and such.
All right, so the next thing is personal protective equipment. So we've ordered a ton of it. The state has given us a ton of it, and it's on order. We're ordering it all the time. We will be providing masks for our staff. We'll have masks on hand for students should they forget them. We will have gowns and gloves for those that need them in certain situations for our nurses. We have face shields. We also will be installing the protective barriers everywhere that we can. And like I said, those will be ongoing orders, but we've received an order already and there's more on the way.
Yeah, we've got about 1,000 variety between disposable masks, shields, and the cloth face covering. So we've already got about 1,000 of those, and we've got more on the way.
More coming. Yep. And, staff members will get what they need, we'll have them on hand for students because they have to be worn all the time. So. The last thing is returning to work after an illness. So one of the things I think is really important to do is if we have a confirmed case, we will follow the CDC guidance. So the CDC will tell us what to do. Beyond that, we'll have protocols in place. One of the things is making sure we have isolation rooms in all of our buildings. We have identified where those are. When the student shows symptoms, that's where they have to go. They'll be there with the nurse until they can be picked up. And then they would see their PCP. Our school nurse is our point of contact for our students, and our staff members' PCPs are their point of contact. Beyond that, we have flowcharts in place for if there's a COVID-19 symptom identified for our staff. We also have them for students as well. Those are laid out by the CDC. And then there's also protections for our employees under the Families First Coronavirus Act for things such as childcare, if they are caring for someone who has COVID-19 or someone at home, and other reasons under the law. Scott and I have been working closely with the attorneys to make sure that we follow. These are all new. They got expanded in, I think, April. And so we've been working with Drummond Woodson to make sure we're very clear on what that looks like. There's actually Drummond Woodson's putting up flowcharts. So that information has been sent to our staff. So the last thing, what is our capacity? So if you remember correctly, there were those 6 items we just detailed that you have to do to have in-person instruction. Can we symptom screen before coming to school? Yes, we can. I mean, we're relying on lots of people to do that. But we will also be checking temperatures when they walk through the door with the technology to do that. Mask and face coverings are a requirement. We'll be providing them if someone doesn't have them, so we can do that. We can teach hand hygiene. We've been doing that for a long time. The CDC has nice videos, and we'll be making some of our own. We have PPE, on order and in stock. We'll have more of it than we probably know what to do with by the time school opens. And we've got flowcharts and following the CDC guidance for returning to school after illness. The problem that we run into in RSU4 is physical distancing. We have gone through our buildings, looked at our classrooms. Some of our elementary classrooms have anywhere from 18 to 22 students in them. We cannot physically distance in our classrooms 3 feet apart and put 22 students in a room. It's just not possible. We measured, we put desks in. Glenn has actually gone with our building administrators and our head custodians and facilities manager and looked at all of our rooms and measured to figure out, can we align desks, and it just wasn't possible. And so it's that item of physical distancing that took one person, 100% in-person instruction off the table. We just couldn't do it. And I know that there are some school districts out there that are going to attempt it. They have different size classrooms. They may be smaller in numbers. Also, one of the things in talking to my colleagues, they had high rates of students who have either A, withdrawn to homeschool or are choosing a remote learning option. Somewhere it's upwards of 30 to 40%. So, but that puts, if we were to do that, it still doesn't, if you were to choose a remote option, it still doesn't mean you couldn't come to school. All of a sudden, we could put ourselves in a situation where we have too many students in class. It's just not possible. So, our options. Obviously. So plan number 1 was in-person learning. Obviously, I've detailed that we just cannot do 100% in-person instruction. The physical distancing is not possible. So that leaves us with 2 options that we have to decide on tonight. Are we going to use a hybrid model, and Kathy's going to talk about what that would look like in RSU4, or do we go 100% remote instruction? I wish I could tell you what the right call is. I can't. Do I think we can pull off a hybrid plan? Yes, I do. But there are some pluses and minuses to that we will get to. We know how to do distance learning. Obviously, we would need some tweaks. We got a lot of good feedback, as Kathy talked about. And so we would make tweaks to that if that's what we do. So, the reality here is this, is we can make the decision to go to a hybrid model and a COVID-19 case shuts us down and we have to go to remote learning. So we're prepared to do that if necessary. But I think the test of the board tonight is really, are we gonna attempt a hybrid or are we gonna do 100% remote instruction?
So before we go into that, we definitely wanted to share what our communities recommend and want. And I am sure, as a board member, you have gotten emails, phone calls, and lots of opinions, and we have too. And I will say it's all over the board. But I wanted to give you the results of our information. So this information is based on our phone calls, which were just done in the end of July, beginning of August. This does not have to do with the survey we did in June. So currently, 64% of our parents want their child to return to school full-time. 7% of our parents want their child to do remote or distant learning. There are 29% of our parents that either are unsure at this time, that they want to see the plan that we have before they decide. 2, we could not reach them, wrong numbers, can't leave a message, so we're not quite sure which side of the fence they are. We have seen staff members, students, and community members recommending all 3 models. So we just wanted you to understand that we're not quite sure. When we look at our homeschool numbers, so Andy alluded to that there are some that are doing homeschool, and I'll talk a little bit about what the difference is after about homeschool versus distant learning. We currently have about 40 students, which is actually less than what we've been having the last 3 years. It doesn't mean that won't change, but we actually have only 40 students at this point. Okay. So I will preface this by when we talked, Andy and I, at a community chat, we had talked about a different type of hybrid model. We talked about our primary in 6th grade and 9th grade coming in full time, and our 7th and 8th grade and 10, 11, 12 possibly being remote, so that parents and students would either be all in or all out. However, once we started getting more guidance from the DOE, we realized between physical distancing, equity issues, and other things that we had to meet in that 55-page document, that hybrid model was not viable. So again, working with what our resources are and our capacity, and also working in the region, we are proposing this hybrid model. So if you look, our cohort, our students are going to be split into 2 cohorts, cohort A and cohort B. Some students will be coming to school on Monday and Tuesday and doing distant learning on Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. The cohort B students would be going to school on Thursday, Friday, and being distant learning on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. We'll determine which students will go in cohort A and which ones will go in by B, partially by bus runs and alphabetical. We're also going to make sure we take into account that siblings would be together and cohort of neighborhoods and such as best we can. There is also going to be a cohort C. As an administrative team, we are going to elect to have a school choice. We've created a criteria, a 4-point criteria at this point, to identify students that were not successful this past spring that need to be in person 4 days a week. There is a huge variety of reasons why students were not successful or need supports more in person than in remote. Students in cohort C would be coming 4 days a week and doing distant learning on Wednesday. The state of Maine has required that we offer a remote learning option, so we are offering a cohort D. That will be a parent choice. So we would be offering material, curriculum, attachment to a teacher, and it would still be considered an RSU4 student. We are calling that program RISE, RSU4 Instruction for Sustained Education. Those students would be going to school at home 5 days a week. They could elect to come back into any of cohort A or B once they contact an administrator and make a reentry plan. There are certainly positives on this hybrid model and some challenges. When we're looking at a hybrid model, it's nice to see kids in buildings. As we said, our teachers do what they do best in person. That's what they were trained to do. That's what they know. And it allows us in a hybrid model to engage all our staff doing the job that they were trained to do. It allows us to ensure that all our devices are in kids' hands. That is the wonderful thing of RSU4, we're one-to-one. And it would allow us to have our kids have the devices that they need to do learning in the classroom as well as their distant learning. By doing this hybrid model, we're limiting the number of kids in the building at one time, which allows us to meet that physical distancing requirement that we were not able to meet in the full in-person instruction. It allows us to meet all the CDC guidelines in this model. It makes our bus capacity manageable. Kids will be able to access resources that they need, whether it's social, emotional, food, a teacher, a social worker, special ed services. They will be able to build relationships with their students, other students, and their staff, and their teachers. And we'd be feeding kids. We are not saying that this is an easy thing. This is a very difficult model because we've never tackled this before. So there's lots of challenges that are ahead if we were to go this approach. If we were to go this way, we need all the staff we can, all hands on deck. If we're dividing kids up, if we're teaching kids in person and remote, we need to make sure we have our staff. It will be a challenge to feed kids in person and also remote learning students. There's changes in engagement when you're in person and also distant learning. So we'll have to come up with some really creative ideas to keep kids engaged. A mask is a challenge. Learning will look different than the spring's distant learning model. We did fairly well, as I mentioned. Our survey results were pretty favorable. However, we know that attendance and accountability and some other measures that because it was emergency learning and a plan, we did not hold as a high regard, that we were definitely going to have to make sure we make it a priority. There is this risk that we go to this model and we have to change to remote learning anyway. So it would be a different change for parents, that they would have to get their childcare for 3 days a week and then go remote and they'd have to change it to 5. This creates more health risks of COVID exposure than if we just went remote learning. Hiring people when we're in and out in different cohorts of people will be a challenge. Every year we have sub-coverage issues. This will be no different. I am working on connecting with our sub list to see what subs are still interested in coming back to RSU4. I don't have that data of numbers yet, but we definitely are still working on that. And we would be remiss to miss that it's a parent's challenge to have 3 days of their children home.
If I could just interrupt for a second. I think it's important to note that the staffing is a big issue. It just is. I mean, we have staff with underlying health conditions. We have staff that have children at home that need childcare. We have staff who have elderly family at home. And when Kathy makes the comment, we need all hands on deck. We need all hands on deck. Just to make the bus runs alone, we need all our bus drivers. So, I think that in itself for me is the scariest part of this. We lose, I don't have a number, but we lose enough staff. We have to switch to remote learning no matter what. I would not have a choice because I would not have the staff, and hiring is a challenge right now. It just is for a host of reasons. So anyway.
I just want to really talk about cohort D. There is some misconception about what's the difference between homeschool versus distant learning. For parents that are choosing to homeschool, they are ultimately exiting from RSU4 and registering their student with the state. Once they do that, they have to make an educational plan with the state, teach their child, and at the end of the year, have either a state certified teacher approve their child's portfolio or the child takes an assessment to show that the child has made a year's worth growth. versus our cohort D would be our distant learning. This student would remain an RSU4 student. They would continue to receive communications from us. They would be able to still access teachers, curriculum, material, resources, and such. In addition, they would also be able to join in possibly in some of our Zooms so they can still have connections with other students. So there would be a difference between homeschool versus distant learning. In school year 18-19, we had about 50 students. 19-20, we had about 54. And as I mentioned earlier, we currently have 40 that are registered now.
Right, beyond that, in thinking about a hybrid model, there are a couple other considerations that we need to have. First of all, I would recommend if we go through a hybrid model, we shorten the student day. The reality here is this: masks. That's a long time to wear a mask. If you think about a kid on a bus, and granted, we'll build mask breaks in, but I wore one recently on election day for over 12 hours. It is tough. It really is, especially in this heat. So looking at the number of hours a student is in school, not to mention also spending time on the bus, that's a long time for our students and staff to be masked. Also, it would allow our staff time to connect with those that are in distance learning, have office hours, provide feedback, post lessons for the next day, and give them the time they need to do the work they need to do to make this successful. Where our teachers can use all the time they can get. This would be something we've never done before, and they're going to need some time. The other thing I would be recommending is a change to the calendar. And this can go a couple of different ways. I don't know if you've seen the news lately, but Lewiston and I believe Auburn, Kathy, are looking at starting on the 14th of September.
Yes, Auburn,
Auburn is meeting tonight, actually currently meeting, and they're proposing and looking at their calendar changing to 14th.
We were looking at starting school on the 8th. I would like to change the calendar at least to then. The reality is this: we need all the time we can to prepare. Just the fact that supply lines are running short, they are tough right now. I mean, we're getting the things we need, but it's for some of it, it's going to come down to the wire. It just is. The PPE is coming in. I mean, the state promised us 7,000 masks. We have a load coming from the National Guard is actually delivering them. So we've got a load coming from the National Guard end of this week, early next week. So it'll be interesting to see what we get from them. The school districts are starting to receive it. We've ordered a ton more, but getting those things in is proving we have it, but we're always going to need more. We're ordering fans, ventilation fans for our classrooms. Getting those is proving to be difficult. We'll get them, but the timelines are running short. We've ordered signage. We've ordered ways to mark the floors so people know which way to walk and enter, just like when we go to Walmart these days. Although I try to avoid Walmart if I can, but it's a necessity in our lives. And so, making sure we've got the correct signage and marking. All of those things are really tough right now to get. And so we need some more time to make sure our buildings are set up appropriately. And to be quite honest, our teachers, our staff, and our administrators are going to need some time to prepare for a model like this. This is not something that we have ever done. And so to do it and do it well, I've said this before, hope is not a strategy. I hope this works. I really do. I want to see kids in our buildings. But we need the time to make sure our staff is ready to do that. Our teachers, we have amazing teachers, we have amazing administrators, amazing technicians. You name it. Our school counselors are fabulous, but they need time to prepare for this. And so if we could delay the start of the calendar, that would be fantastic. So ultimately, that is what a hybrid model would look like in RSU4. Obviously, remote learning, we've done that. We know how to do it. We would make some tweaks to it, probably the hours that we did it. But ultimately, the decision really now is, do we go with a hybrid model or do we go remote learning? Do I think this hybrid model can work? Sure. I think just about anything can work. But I can't tell you without a shadow of a doubt, I will be calling a special board meeting in a week after being in to say, so we can't make this work. I can't guarantee that. I don't know. Literally, I don't know. It's an interesting place to be for me. Usually I have an answer. Today I just don't. So that's what a hybrid model would look like in our school.
I have a question.
Yes.
Let's unshare the screen first. Can we- So we
What's
can
that?
see. Unshare your screen so the Zoom folks can see.
I did answer on this one. Yeah, we're on. I don't know.
So I have a couple of questions. The first one that I have is the talk of mask breaks, and what does that look like for students, given their developmental, their ages? So pre-K through fifth grade-ish, what's that gonna look like, and then what will it look like for middle school and high school?
Sure. Yeah, you want to take that one?
Yeah, so I met with Dr. Shaw last week, and we talked a lot about mask breaks. So ultimately, teachers are encouraged, I mean, we live in Maine, if you can go outside and have mask breaks outside, that's the most encouraged method. So having class outside or just going out and getting a breath of air is fine. So ultimately, they would like for everyone to be 6 feet apart. In a classroom, if the child is reading or doing an assignment at their desk, half the class can take their mask off, so every other, and they recommend 10 to 15 minutes maximum. So by us doing every other, the particles are kind of staying in one region and not kind of going back and forth. And then after 10, 15 minutes, those students would put their mask on, and the other half could do that. One to remember, in a hybrid model, our class sizes could range from 6 to 13 in a pre-K 5. So it would be very easy to do half a class. And we're not talking, we can distance them pretty well and then do half. So it would be manageable to be able to have multiple mask breaks. Is that helpful?
Yes. So then the other question that I have to kind of go along with that is the shortening of the school day. So I find it interesting that we're recommending that potentially shortening the school day for primary and elementary students only 30 to 45 minutes, and middle school or high school students 45 to 60 minutes. Honestly, I would think that would be the other way around, given a child's capacity to be able to be in a classroom, mask up, and to be productive and attentive in school. To me, students who are in middle school and high school have the capacity to do that for longer periods of time, as opposed to primary and elementary school students. So I'm just curious as to why those timeframes are such for those age groups.
Do you want me to go or you want to go, Glenn?
Is
so
it
we-
purely logistical because of
Busing, it's busing. So we kept our, it's logistical of busing, so we kept it. It doesn't mean, Jen, that we don't consider flopping and dismiss the elementary and the primary kids first and have a much shorter academic day and then have the middle school, high school run after. We could explore that if that's how the board so chooses, but we tried to keep the bus runs the same. And so as such, the lengthening of the day was more at the high school to then get the students home and then get the elementary home. So that's how we did it, but we could consider flopping it if that's.
I would recommend that we exploring potentially flopping that. I just know, in working as a school counselor with all the age groups, that expecting the younger kids to be there longer, there are some benefits, but they're not gonna have the capacity to be able to be there for that length of time.
So would that mean that if we did that, that would put the young students home before the older students were there? So if the older students give the childcare.
Correct, so we bring some
Students would be home alone?
Yeah, I understand. I'm concerned in knowing that we want it to be successful. I think we would be remiss if we didn't try to look at what potential options there are.
Vicki, you, oh, Okay. Probably.
With the busing,
Wait a minute, can you get the microphone?
oh, sorry, with the busing plan, what's the average amount of kids we can have on a bus? 2 per seat, you said?
2 per seat, so it'd be up to 46 on the bus.
Yeah.
Okay, can you, we need a microphone for anybody else who's talking.
Sorry. Yeah, so that would be 2 students to a seat, giving a maximum of 46 students on the bus.
So that, actually, Robert, the guidance changed, so it has been physical distancing on the bus. I actually received an embargoed copy last night. It was posted this morning. The framework was changed. They're no longer saying that. All they're saying is, it is not advisable to put a bus to full capacity.
Right.
Full capacity of a bus is 60.
So it's 62 for high school, middle school, 77 for elementary.
Right. And what we're saying is 2 per seat is maximum. Right.
So what would a morning bus run look like for like cohort A or B? Would you try to stay like in the same geographic area as far as cohort A and then cohort B the next time, so the buses aren't running all over town every day?
So virtually the bus runs would end up being the same. So if you take
Right.
cohort A, and let's say there's 300 students that we got to pick up between the 3 towns, you could literally have 2 students per row or what have you
Right.
to pick up in group A, and then group B, the other 2 students that live on the same road, we'd be picking them up the other day. So virtually the bus runs wouldn't change. It'd just be the amount of students that we're picking up, therefore it'd be a shorter time. Most of our bus runs now are anywhere from 50 minutes to an hour max on a bus run, so the time would be cut in half,
Yeah.
if not even more.
And we-
Remember about cohort C?
Right.
Because cohort C could be anywhere.
Right, can be anywhere. That was gonna be my next question. So what about, what was my train of thought now? I know what it was. Ventilation in the building. Are we working on moving towards like ventilation for each room?
Yes.
Okay,
So the high school, as you know, is getting brand new units.
right, yeah.
So that's going to improve that. Middle school and Cary Ricker have air handlers, that's been upgraded. Libby Tozier and Sebastian Primary, we're looking at air purifiers. In fact, I received one quote today, I'm gathering another one to see which one is our option, Mr. Carlton wants to go with. So we're looking, those would be wall mounted.
Yep.
So that way there for the challenges on the pre-K rooms, there is so much stuff with the social distancing and everything. We didn't want anything kind of sitting on the floor, so everything would be mounted up on the wall up out of the way.
Absolutely.
So, may I just ask a question about the busing?
Sure.
How much distance can you get between those kids? I mean, I know that like 3 to 6 feet apart, you're required to wear a mask. But it seems like, I mean, some kids are larger than others, so they are going to be closer together. So if we're not social distancing the children in the bus before they get to school, I just don't see, if they're making such an importance of social distancing the kids when they get to school, why are they not doing that when they're going to school?
Andrea, that's a great question. I don't know. I can't answer it for you. No, that was new guidance that the commissioner kept talking about and then came out today. I wish I had an answer for you. It was the exact same thing I said to Glenn Scott and Kathy today. I said, it's very interesting to me that we're talking about needing social distancing in our buildings, but we can't pack a bus like we typically do, but we can put a reasonable number on. It's a great question. I don't have an answer for it.
Well,
Yes, Robbie?
have we asked how many people are gonna be bringing their kids to school?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Sorry.
So right now, on that survey on slide 16, it showed that only 64% are committed, saying yes, they're definitely coming to school. The 30% we're not sure. They're
I'm
still.
talking about transport.
Oh, yes. I don't know if I'm gonna right off the top of my head. How many we're gonna transport?
And I can tell you 2 per seat. We can transport how many at a time, Glenn?
So for a bus run, so let's just use hypothetically our high school, middle school run.
Okay, we need a mic. People at home need to be able to.
I got you.
respond to this.
Let me understand. So, So if we're gonna choose our high school, middle school run, if we're using all 12 buses, using 46 students on the bus, that's 552. So if we have on our high school, middle school under the 552, that means we're within that guideline completely. Anything more than that would be a struggle.
So about 90% said they would use our buses.
Yeah.
However, there was quite a few that said, if you need us to transport to make it easier, then we would. But we still put them as they would be using our buses.
So other questions?
Yeah, I have a question, Bob.
Go ahead.
When would it, from K through 12, when would the breakup be? How many little guys would go to school and how many seniors and how would that work?
It would be about half at a time, roughly. I mean, it's not perfect, just depending on needs and families, but if you figure we have about 1,400 students in the district, we would have about 700 in at any given time, roughly.
Okay. Thank you.
My question is around the distance included when you're feeding these kids that are in school and how that's going to be taken into account.
Yes.
Yep, so what we've done is we've gone to our cafeterias throughout the district and we've set the tables up 3 feet apart. So our average cafeteria table is 6 feet. So we'd be putting one student on one end, the other student on the other end, giving that 6 feet between, 3-foot distance, either the front or towards the back. So we can roughly put about 38 students to a cafeteria. I know we gotta work together with the administrators on times, what have you, but based on the numbers in the building, our lunch serves wouldn't change. That time would be the exact same time. We'd have to, like in the high school, we're talking about moving to the gym. To the middle school, we'd go to the top of the stage. Same thing over at Carey Ripper if we needed to.
Thank you. Question? Robbie?
I'm good. That was.
Vicky?
Question I have, if high school kids are not allowed to have lockers, will they be carrying backpacks around with them?
Yes, so we've been talking with the high school about textbooks would stay at home and the things that they would need would be part of the Google Classroom and such. So they wouldn't be lugging around all of their materials, so it wouldn't be a 20-pound bag. The other piece is, if they're having a red day and a white day, they can only have to bring the materials for that one day as opposed to their entire locker. But we're trying to reduce the amount of students conjugating into the hallways and, being able to keep it clean. And if we're having them move, they move with their stuff.
Okay, so backpacks are allowed.
Backpacks would be allowed.
So we have been moving. So I'm gonna say, we've been moving for a while to get rid of textbooks and get everything, because everybody has a computer. So they can have the textbook on their computer instead of having to carry one around. So as we move farther and farther that way, there's, it's the necessity of having the little bag that's got the computer in it and some paper and some other things that they might need. So there should be less and less of a need for a lot of stuff to be carried around.
So yeah, some of our textbooks are already digital anyway, they come with a digital component. And we're gonna be requiring our teachers to use the Google Classroom from 3 through 12. So the material and the things that they need to access will be done electronically. So it will be less that they need to be carrying.
Andrea, did you have a question?
I did, yeah, so, and I know that you had mentioned that, you wanted to prolong the start date of school to either September 8th or at least September 8th, right?
Yes.
I was wondering, have you considered doing remote learning first and then phasing in, like an in-house learning model to see how other schools are doing that are starting before us and with an in-house model?
That's certainly a choice that we have. What that would mean is you all would have to decide that we go remote, 100% remote instruction to start. And then we would set a timeline for us to come back and talk about how it's been going around us and does it make sense to phase into a hybrid.
Vicky,
I have another question. Should a family not have internet access at all?
Yep.
How will that be taken care of for this family?
Your team can address that.
Hi, Vicki. So, the Department of Education, the MLTI program, got together and they actually provided the district with various hotspots. So we have those in district, we're casing them up, making them secure so they are filtered, and they're gonna be able to be, checked out through our library. So we do have that available for families that don't have internet.
I would say,
In our parent survey, there was over 85%, so they did not have internet issues all the time. And then a couple of them just mentioned that they had internet issues on certain storm days. If you remember in April, we had a storm day and such. So there was some days that we had struggles with internet, but for 85%, they had no internet issues.
I have another question.
go ahead, Vicky.
I'm sorry.
That's all right.
And Andy, I think you mentioned the reason for starting, what, September 14th, was
Well, September 8th at least.
was because the staff and all needed the time to get all the new protocols in place.
Yes.
So if you did remote learning before you opened up, the say, the hybrid, that would take a lot of their time away.
Right. It would. I mean, we need some time just from a facility standpoint alone. Yeah.
Vicky?
My next question, what will the online learning look like? Will there be specific teachers who will teach specifically for online learners and just in school teaching teachers? And will they stay with the same cohorts of online teaching, like a little class?
Yeah, it's a great question. We've actually been working through that.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, we're gonna have to look at our student cohorts and how many students are choosing the cohort D RISE program versus the cohort A and B. If I'm a student in cohort A and B, our typical instructional model now is kind of like what I call an I do, we do, you do approach. And so on the days that they're in person, they'll do I do, we do together. So they'll see the teacher doing it, they'll do it together, and then the you do practice component will be done remotely. We also talked about on that Wednesday, having an opportunity to get some interventions, maybe have a class meeting that works on the social emotional, where cohort A and B get to have a Zoom together so they can physically see each other. So there are other, I'm not quite sure in terms of our numbers if like this staff member is going to do just remote learning, but it would be an opportunity. We would still provide special ed services remotely, still provide GT services, so they could have a good Google Classroom with resources that they could do remotely, as well as some other social like teletherapy. We have a lot of options that we can do that could be in a hybrid model. I think it really just depends on the child and what they're going to need and what that will look like.
I have another question.
Go right ahead.
Sorry, maybe to Glenn. What is your procedure for students who take one bus and need to take another bus on an emergency or a birthday party or something like that? Will this continue, or are we saying you're only allowed to ride your bus home and to school?
Very good question. I don't know if I have an answer for that right yet. I know Mr. McCullough and I need to sit down and have that conversation. Right now, I've been focusing on the numbers coming in and how to safely do that. I haven't come across to the point of figuring out what we're going to do with the multiple stops. From my perspective, they wouldn't do that. Either be home or to grandmothers or to a daycare or what have you. That would limit that. Mr. Hall and I would have a conversation.
Yeah, and from my perspective, I think we're gonna probably have to go that way. There's just no choice. We need to keep the same cohorts of kids on buses, just like in classrooms, things like that. I mean, we don't have a policy that says that. In absence of policy, that would be something that I would do. But Glenn and I have talked about it, we talked about it some already. From my perspective, we need to keep the same kids on the same bus every day. And I know that's hard, but given what we have going on right now, we need to know, A, where all our students are, and B, if you think about if there is a case, contact tracing. That's going to be big. The CDC is going to call us and go, all right, So give us a list of every kid, that they were on the bus with. Give us a list. We may not be able to do that if we got kids riding all over the place. And it's just not.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Probably,
In the cohort C, Kathy?
Yep.
How many kids do you expect in that cohort C?
So it's a small population for cohort C. Administrators are meeting tomorrow to discuss the who those students would be. Again, we're at 4 criteria. We're looking at a small population, less than 5%.
So would those students be mixed in cohort A and B?
So again, it's going to be individual to what this child needs, because they might be there for social emotional support, they might be there for special ed services, they, depending on what criteria they met, they might be a homeless student or whatever. So we would like to have them attached to one cohort, and then on the other days that they would be how they would get their services. So they might go to a special ed room, they might get their social work, they might go to a different room that gets their online learning and things. So we would try to limit the contact between the 2 cohorts.
Going back real quick, Robbie, you had asked a question about bus capacity. One of the things that obviously helps us on the second run is a lot of our high school students drive.
right.
That's a reality. They would still continue to drive. We wouldn't change that practice.
All right, and there had been a proposal that I had received, somebody that suggested the possibility of a hybrid being, instead of 2 days a week in person, that we do cohorts A and B for a week at a time. So you would have cohort A would go for 1 week, and then they would distance learn the second week and flip that over. One of the comments they made was that then we wouldn't have to deep clean on Wednesdays and on the weekends. They go and change the population because we'd have them there all week. So reduce that necessity and give them a whole week of in-person instruction and then a whole week. So we're discussing whether we're going to hybrid. It's also open if there's modifications to what that hybrid might be. So since I did get something from one of the members of the community that made that suggestion, that might be an alternative hybrid. Just putting it out there for thought this evening, but just for the thought, that it was suggested. I did get emails, as you all probably did too, from many people that wanted the kids all day, 5 days a week. When all of them there, we know that we physically can't do that with the limitations with our facilities. So we don't really have that option at this time. And I have some that want it all remote because they probably will keep theirs and put them in cohort D because they're not sure they're safe to come back. So board members, it's kind of like, so this is kind of a discussion about it, but we kind of have to get an idea of, are we in support of this plan? Are we interested in getting more information about another possibility? It'd be interesting to know whether I have a question about the delayed school dates. So if we delay the school start date to the 8th, understand that we have some teacher workshop days that we will move ahead of time. But if we go to the 14th, are the staff still going to be into work, or because that's what we say we need the time for?
Yes. Yeah, we have working days under the collective bargaining agreements. We have staff there doing those kind of things.
Right.
Yep.
Okay, so that's kind of my questions. A lot of mine were already answered because I was the board rep on the CPT. So I spent last Friday going over this already. It's not perfect. I guess it's not what I'd like it to be, but it's the best that I thought we could come up with based upon all the criteria we have. It'd be interesting to kind of get a sense of what you think the right start date would be.
Question, any of the students that are going to LRTC, now I know that Lewiston has just said that they're starting, what is it, 14?
Yeah.
So clearly we're not keeping kids back from that.
Right. We
Okay.
currently have a small issue with the calendar with LRTC that we're
Yeah.
working on.
Yeah.
I know meeting's gonna happen and looking at individual student schedules. What's happened across the region is, there are 6 sending schools, school districts to LRTC. 3 or maybe 4 now, 4 of those schools have changed their high school schedule to a 4x4. I can tell you in good conscience, and you and I have talked about this, I'm not in favor of 4x4, and I'm certainly not in favor of moving Oakdale High School to a 4x4. I don't think it's what's right for our kids. I can't speak for any other school district's kids, I can speak for ours. It would have a huge detriment to some of the programming we have at Oakdale High School. One being the bar program, which you all have heard about, which has been fantastic. It would effectively end us being able to do the bar program. I can't in good conscience do that. And so consequently, where I had a conversation with Rob Callahan, who's the director at LRTC this morning, they're willing to get creative, work outside the box and look at individual student schedules. Because the reality is under the law, students can't be denied access to a technical center. Now, that's a misnomer to some degree because we only get so many slots per program. So some students are in fact denied access to LRTC. However, in our case, we've been pretty good about getting as many students as possible there. I don't want to hinder that. However, depending on what happens in Lewiston, will depend on what happens with our students that go to LRTC. So we're currently working through that. Marco has done a fabulous job of coordinating some of that. So we'll see how that plays out.
So, Dory, we haven't heard from you. Do you have any comments or questions?
Dory, do you have any questions? You're muted currently.
So on the school bus, there will be 2 children in each seat.
Potentially, yeah, that would be the max.
Okay. A little bit uncomfortable with that. And what is the situation with masks on, mask off in the class? Again, can you please run that by me again?
Sure, Kathy will talk about that.
Yeah, so masks will be on, most of the time. So we will have scheduled mask breaks where half the students can take it off for 10 to 15 minutes, and then the second half of students can take it off for 10 to 15 minutes. Teachers will also be encouraged to go outside, and at that point, when students are 6 feet apart, they can take their masks off, as well as they'll have their masks off during snack and lunch times as well.
And answer your question?
Kind of, yeah, thank you.
Vicki?
Brings me up to another question. If students are taking their masks off, how are we going to keep track of that? Will they have lanyards that they can clip it onto so that it's on their body? If they're outside and they throw it, do we have to supply another one?
So all students either have a backpack, a cubby, or that kind of stuff. So if they're like leaving, or a different place, then they would have it in there. We have talked about ordering the lanyards so that they just, and I think people have seen them where you just hang them. So either on, or then they're just hanging on their chest to reduce them. Yep.
So if something happens to one, we have more on.
Right, so we need to encourage our parents to, as much as possible, provide face masks for their students that, if they can put their name on it, that's fine, but they should go home and get washed on a regular basis, and brought back, because we got 1,000 masks. We're gonna have 1,000 students in 2 days in school. So if nobody brings masks and we give them, we can go through a lot of masks in a short period of time. And then we can't meet the criteria and we go distant. Yes, Vicki?
So sorry.
No, don't be sorry. You gotta ask the question.
All right, when students are getting off the bus and getting on the bus, how is dismissal going to happen? If you don't want lots of crowds in the hallway, have you thought about that?
Which one are you, all right?
You can.
So, the conversation that we've had would be per classroom. So if you've got 8 students, 10 students, 12 students, that one class would go out, they would get on the bus. And we've been advised by the state to load the bus back to front. So they would be getting on at that point, and then we dismiss another one, so we keep the crowds.
There will be hand sanitizer stations on each of the bus. Students are required to take some and use it getting on a bus, and then when they get off the bus.
And another piece to that, if you're talking about dismissal, one of the things that's gonna have to end in our buildings is the congregating crowds of parents outside our offices. It just can't happen anymore. So students we're working on just how we're dismissing students that get picked up. I walk into Carrie Ricker on any given day, or status primary, there's 50 parents, and I get it. You want to come in and get your kid. I have 4 of them in my house myself. I'd love to go into Benton Elementary and stand around with the other parents and have a conversation. We won't be able to do that anymore. It'll be a dismissal procedure. Students go out or get locked out.
And parents are in their cars.
Parents will be in their cars.
So we will be planning to do a virtual open house for every school. So picture the basic SOPs for parents of pick up, drop off. And we plan on doing a day in the life of. So what do the classrooms look like? Meet their child's teacher with the mask off, with the mask on, so that they can recognize them. So we'll do that on those first workshop days with our staff and post them for our parents. But all those dismissal procedures are gonna look different per building, just on the structure of how things go for dismissal. But we do plan on creating those videos so that we can be instructional for our parents.
Okay, so,
I have another question about loading.
go right ahead. Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead, Andrea.
I have a question about loading. Okay, I have a question about loading the buses from back to front. Does that mean that we're mixing ages depending on when they're being picked up? So we could have like a very young child and an older child sitting together? Or like are they still, what does that look like?
Yeah, so the high school, middle school students, based on the numbers, they ride together anyway. So our high school, middle school run in the morning. That's just the standard run. So the elementary, those students, SPS and LT are tied together because of the transfer bus. So those students, you're not gonna have a high school student with a pre-K. Those are just 2 completely separate runs. So if we do the dismissal and if we decide tonight to reverse or change, if we do the younger students first or whatever, those students will stay together as well as the older students will stay together as well.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so, other questions from board members? Comments from board members?
If we did remote learning, when would that remote learning take place? Because we've got a lot of kids in daycares, we've got a lot of parents that work. Are teachers going to plan to do that in the morning, or are they going to do it when parents get home at night? Or are they going to rely on daycare centers to facilitate instruction for many children?
So I think that it's a great question and it's a convoluted answer. There are some daycare providers that are choosing to have a hybrid teacher to support on some of those days. But if we were full remote, we would be looking at the instruction in the morning. But we have there's a difference between asynchronous and synchronous. So asynchronous is when our staff are putting lessons in Google Classroom or Seesaw so students can access it anytime. And synchronous was when students have to be online with their teacher to access their class. For our younger learners, we tended to do more asynchronous, so we posted the lessons and the parents were accessing them more in the evenings, not even during the school day. So we were very flexible with how we provided the instruction. So once we get to those classes, we would group classes based on do they need it in the morning, afternoon, or evening, if that's what we needed. But we also made some adjustments for individual students. So if we were full remote, we would be contacting parents and figuring that out. we would like to have a structure. Our parents wanted similar platforms, similar structure. So we would start with that and then work with the parents that needed to make those adjustments. So a majority of our students would have time to connect and be on at a certain time, and we would adjust for those that need it.
And Andrea, just, I think, just to address a little bit more, Kathy, can you talk about when, so cohort A is in, cohort B is not, cohort B is in asynchronous learning, correct?
Yeah, so they will not be, so other districts would have and ask their students to be linking into a classroom. We're not asking to do that. So we're asking them to do their independent work. But also when you're looking at that shortened day, we're asking our staff members to have that office hour to make sure they're connecting with the students that are distant learning that day. So that way they can provide feedback on assignments. If I'm a cohort B and I'm distant learning on Monday, I would then know that my staff member would be open from 1 to 2 if I'm a high school student. And I could get feedback from my staff, from my teacher. I could get my assignment or connect with my teacher and do a Google Hangout or whatever it needs to be to get feedback so I know what I need to do on Tuesday. So we're trying to use not only that shortened day, but allowing our staff to connect with our distant learners.
I would hope that they all be recorded so the students can watch it at any time. So you might have internet connectivity, but you might have 3 students. They can't all be watching, they're all high school, they can't all be watching the classroom being taught at the same time. So we really have to look at the ability to record each, post them out there, and the students watch them when they can. Can we control whether they watch 3 days worth of classes all in one afternoon, binging Psychology 101? No, we probably can't. The key will be when it comes to assessment time, have they been able to demonstrate that they have the grasp of material that's necessary to continue on? So it really puts the onus on the student and then on the parents as well to track and make sure that their students are doing the work and watching the lessons. So, if we were to go full remote, and as we are with the hybrid, it's going to, as we go, every day, every week, there's going to be some tweaking that's going to be done to it. We don't have a perfect plan. No one's saying that we have a perfect plan now, or exactly what it's going to look like on day one, no matter what we do. So the only one we can do that is if everybody was back in. But that's not a possibility.
I do have one more question.
Go ahead, Joy.
With the remote and with the kids that will be remote learning on cohort A and B different days, will their food be delivered on the bus?
Yeah.
On the day?
That's a great question, Dory. I mean, and, the reality here is if we've got students in school, we're running our buses to bring students in and out. So, while I would love to say we'd be able to deliver food like we did when we were in full remote learning, we don't have that capacity. We're going to be lucky to have enough bus drivers to do what we're doing. So we're looking at how do we create static, being able to, and I know it's hard. Parents aren't home, but maybe providing lunches at our building, people can come, get lunches. I mean, we want to feed as many people as possible, but infrastructure-wise, Glenn and I and Scott talked about it at length. The ability to run, we're going to be running 2 runs in the morning, 2 runs in the afternoon. We're going to be running a run to Lewiston, not to mention, anything else in between, to be able to actually run our bus routes all day long. We just don't, financially, we don't have the capacity to do that, and infrastructure, we just don't. We don't have the staff to do that.
I think what wasn't mentioned is that pre-K will be all day instead of half day.
Right.
Yeah.
I don't know if they would, I think it was on the slide maybe.
Yeah, so our pre-K would either be cohort A and come 2 days, full days, or cohort B and be 2 days, Thursday, Friday. So we would not be running our pre-Ks for half days. And they didn't come to school on Wednesdays anymore.
Vicki?
Regarding the lunch, is there a way to send a lunch home or 3 lunches on the last day of the cohort is at the school?
So we talked about that as well, capacity wise. I mean, one of the things I don't think anybody saw was our assembly lines, when we did our lunches. I mean, we filled our cafeterias with bagged lunches. We're not gonna have kids in those cafeterias. So, trying, and I hear you. Listen, I wanna feed anybody we can feed. But the reality is to be just what it takes for resources and manpower to put out that many lunches we just don't have it, and it's difficult. No, we talked about the same thing. I mean, if I could feed everybody every day, I would, because it's just, I know how important it is. Yeah.
It just occurs to me that, we went from having everybody in-house to everybody being remote. And now we're looking at trying to meet the needs in person as best as realistically possible. I think that this plan, it's had a lot of hard work, and I think for now, to meet the needs of the student, of 2/3 of the population of parents and kids saying, we want our kids back in school, I would wholeheartedly agree with that. It's really important to set that framework, that precedence. I mean, these kids have not been in a school building for as long as we have not met, which is 5 months in person. And I really think having that face-to-face, even if it's only a couple days a week, is so very important. Kids have grown a lot in that time frame, and they need to have an opportunity to be able to establish a new routine with somebody else. And even if teachers are looping with the students and all, there's just so many things that have gone on that I think it's vitally important to have kids, even if they're gonna be in school only 2 days a week, that they are physically there to get readjusted to that routine in their life. It's huge.
Well, and Jen, you make a great point. We talk about kids in educational stamina, right? And to be out of the school, I mean, there's so many things that happen in school. Not just education. If you think about, the reality is public schools have become the largest social service organization on the planet. They just have, good, bad, or indifferent, we've had to. We adapt to meet the needs of our kids. So the things that go on in the building that are all education, right? I mean, getting school counseling is education. Seeing the school nurse is education. Walking through the hallways is education, but there is a stamina that goes into that. And right now, the idea, I'll be candid, I mean, we can't bring them in regardless, but the thought of all of a sudden, all of them, having the stamina is really difficult. I look at my own children. I mean, I've got, in my house, I have 14, 12, 11, and 7. My 12-year-old and 11-year-old are used to going to bed at 10 o'clock at night and getting up at 10 o'clock in the morning. I mean, it is a struggle. I woke them up at 7 this morning. You would have thought I had taken away their phones, their laptop, whatever it was. So, there's going to be an adjustment period to this. There's no question about it.
Okay, so I guess we can do it under the motion, and we can open up and get comments from the public. But then when we get to the motion, we're gonna have to move to just what it's gonna be. Is it gonna be this height, and what day is it gonna start? All right, so that can come under the motion can be amended if people aren't in it, and don't agree with it, and then we'll go on from there, and then it becomes a board issue at that point. So at this time, if the board members have no more questions or comments now, this isn't keeping you for asking, you can certainly do it under the motion too. I'd like to open it up for the community members. When a community member speaks, if you raise your hand or put in chat, we'll acknowledge you, but I would like for you, for the sake of our minutes, for you to identify yourself and which town you are a resident of, so that we have that information. This is all being recorded, so that we will have it for the necessary minutes keeping purposes. So at this time, the superintendent will look for raised hands, or a chat message, and call upon you.
Yep, if you would like to speak, please hit the raise hand button, and I will call on you. So the first one I see is April. April, go ahead.
So, why can't we do thermal scanning on the buses? That you get by school, because if they're not, then we're going to expose all
Yeah.
the people buses.
So April's asked, why can't we do thermal scanning on the buses? The thermal scanning cameras cannot mount to buses. They require a black box. We also aren't allowed under federal law to put anything extra on buses that isn't supposed to be there. So I hear you. I thought about that as well, April. How could we put those cameras on there? But it's just not possible. Okay. Mrs. Kamiri. Oh, you're muted.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Nicole Kamari, teacher at Oak Hill High School, but also RSU 48 president. And I just wanted to start off by thanking everyone and recognizing everyone who was involved in creating these plans. It was a lot of work. People volunteered their time and expertise to work on this special district project. And they did it to help the community move forward. And I know that Andy and Kathy worked really, really hard this summer, countless hours putting this stuff together, and we really appreciate it. I also understand that this is very stressful for parents and for teachers and for students, and we all have the same goal. We want to get back to school as soon as we can, but it has to be as safely as possible, and that's really what I wanted to talk about with regards to hybrid. So some of the concerns I have to do with what has been talked about already, even by Superintendent Carlton, is that some of these safety measures have not yet been in place. They're not yet in place, like plexiglass in the offices, plexiglass in the classrooms. Some of this equipment is still on order. Signage is still on order. And to use Mr. Carlton's words, it might come down to the wire if we open on September 8th with a hybrid plan. I'm very concerned, as with Andrea and Lori, with the bus situation. This is news to me because Mr. Carlton and Kathy and I met yesterday with regards to the busing. And so it went from 3 feet of distancing with masks on to now 2 students per seat. And that is concerning for us. I think that it's kind of hypocritical, or it's contradictory, I would say, with what the state is asking us to do in the classrooms versus what they're allowing us to do on buses. So I would highlight that just because the state says that we can do it, I would ask the board, does that mean we should do it? Two people per seat. Also, with regards to busing, we don't have any bus aides to help bus drivers maintain safety on the bus. Bus drivers' #1 job is to transport kids safely. This is added responsibility to make sure that kids are wearing their masks, they're loading properly, they're unloading properly, they're not touching each other. We need people on the bus to help with that. And I know that, or Mr. Carlton and I spoke about the possibility of hiring bus aides, but we don't have them yet, is my point. We only have 4 nurses for 5 school buildings. In that one school building that doesn't have a nurse, that added stress and responsibility gets placed on our secretaries. And this is a very stressful time for our secretaries, so I need to make sure that I speak up and voice their concerns as well. Wednesdays in a hybrid model would be virtual for everyone except staff members, which, if we really worry about staff member health and safety, we've proven in the spring that we can teach virtually. And Wednesdays, in my opinion, should be used for deep cleaning in order to separate those those cohorts, even more. So that's another, concern of ours. We're concerned overall about the risk versus reward with the hybrid model. I agree with Jen that kids want, it is very important that kids get back to the classroom. But at the high school and middle school, we're gonna see our kids 1 hour a week. And all of these bodies are gonna be in the building. So I'm wondering, is the educational practice gonna be that much better in a hybrid model than it would be in a remote model? With that added risk to our communities. Now, I'm not asking the board to vote against a hybrid model. We need a way to ease back into school. We need to get our kids back to school. We need to get back to work as much as we can, or as quickly as we can, but it has to be done as safely as possible. And the concern from the association is that currently, tonight, the board is, the district is not prepared with all of those safety measures in place, all of those things that I listed. So I would hate for the board to vote for a hybrid plan tonight, and come September 8th, we didn't get our PPE orders in. We didn't get our thermometer, temperature checkers in. We don't have those things in place. So I need to voice that from the association that health and safety has to be the number one concern, and busing is one of those big pieces, and the hybrid plan relies heavily on 2 students per seat, and I think that that's a big concern. So I would implore the board to consider the vote tonight means that, it's a crucial vote tonight. Whereas if we were to vote for remote, we can always go to hybrid when we're ready. But as of tonight, the buildings aren't ready. So I just wanted to voice those concerns. And I want to thank everybody, Kathy and Andy. You've really done an awesome job putting all of this work together, and I really do appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay,
Next.
next comment.
All right, Mr. Bailey.
Thank you. I'm not sure if this can be a question or not, but I think it goes well with what we just heard. Hopefully everybody can hear me.
You can.
Thank you. So it seems to me like the biggest outcome of the spring, and maybe it's disputed by who was just speaking, that the children didn't really learn as much as they would in school. I think that probably goes without saying, but how well did they learn? So the question I posted in the YouTube chat was, what are the significant changes that have been done to the remote learning plan to improve on that? Because it seems to me like as much as we're gonna try to send the kids back to school, there's gonna be a disruption, and we're gonna be short of staff, and we're just gonna be forced back into remote learning. So that's my biggest question really is, what are the most significant changes to improve on that?
So before I let Kathy talk about that, because that's her area, let me first remind people, or probably might be the first time they know it, but when we first went to remote, we really couldn't teach anything new. We had to just reinforce what already been taught because of statutory and title requirements. So until we could figure out a way that we could teach all of our students new material remotely, we couldn't do that. So that delayed it to start with. Now, Kathy can talk about what changes are envisioned if we were to go remote that would provide for a more robust educational experience.
So since our spring, we have looked closely at our attendance and engagement and also our grading practices. So I think grading for us is really about giving kids feedback on their performance, and For our pre-K 5 students, we didn't really give any grades. We stopped giving grades. For 6 through 8, they were in a similar situation. And high school was passed and incomplete. So it really is, it's an all or nothing. So it's not really like we were giving great feedback to students about the progress. As Mr. English had alluded to, we kind of did 2 weeks of maintenance or skills maintenance on our learning. Then we did some new learning, and then we did some skill maintenance again. So there was a transition. Where now it's going to be all new learning, we have learned that we can leverage some of our platforms that we've already used. Our students already know how to use those platforms, so we can actually do assessments and grading and feedback in those programs. So some of our things that we normally do, that we kind of had to employ for everybody, that will be how we start in the fall. So all students will use Seesaw from grades pre-K 5, and 3 through 12 we use Google Classroom as well. So students can access their material, get their feedback. And I heard from in my ad hoc committees, it was pretty clear that our teachers really like those platforms to give feedback because students were actually reading it and responding versus getting a English paper and not looking at the comments for days. So there are some things that we learned. We leveraged some of our platforms, and we are definitely looking at getting those practices stronger.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, next. Megan, you would unmute yourself, you're good to go. Megan, are you there? I guess not. All right, next is Mr. Desjardins.
You
Nope. We can't hear you. There we go. All right, are you there?
We can't hear you. We'll try and get back to you.
Okay, April.
Hold on 1 second. We got to get you turned up.
Go ahead.
There's other places that have made adaptations to the buses, but plexiglass around like bus drivers. So is some of that federal money that you guys are getting, is that gonna go to buses protections, especially since we're raising numbers of the students being on the buses?
It's April.
Hi, April. So we looked at putting the plexiglass around the bus drivers. Some of the concerns with that is as you know, April, there's a confined regulation on the bus. So if a bus is in an accident, depending on how that accident is, the bus driver could actually be confined and or pinned in that bus. So we didn't want to look at that as a viable option because for the safety for the bus driver. Another thing is that has to be signed off by the state police, the same ones that do bus inspection. So our concern there is it's subject to opinions. So if it's not installed right, you can't use the bus until it's installed correctly and the state police sign off on it, which I think is a great thing. But overall, our concern is if that bus was in a particular situation and in an accident, depending on what that accident is, the driver themselves could be confined because of the plexiglass in there and wouldn't allow them to get out of the bus safely and therefore assist the students getting off the bus as they would be if they wouldn't.
So what kind of safety measures are you guys offering for the buses and the students that are on? Is 26 students or whatever, 2 per seat that is not even 3 feet? And like, I'm just looking like if the kids get to the school and then they're thermally scanned, like great, you guys at school are great, but the kids are already all exposed. Those however many that are on our bus, plus the driver. So like, we as a district need to all be, protected, the kids, the bus drivers, teachers, everybody. So I'm just trying to see like, what are we doing all around for everybody?
Yep, so that's where the district's PPE comes in. So we purchase shields, we purchase 2 different type of masks. They are going to be mandated for students as well as the driver. Understanding that the shield in night driving may not be the best, but we are providing that as an option for the driver to wear. So there's hand sanitizer on the bus. I do have a unit that we'll go over when we have our meeting at the beginning of the year on how the drivers can disinfect the bus when they clean it. And the students are going to be required to use the hand sanitizer when they get on the bus, and they're going to be required to use the hand sanitizer off the bus. Understanding that number of the 46 is maximum. I think when we get into our bus runs, and depending on what the plan that's decided on today, parents who have said they may take transportation may decide not to. So those numbers are not solid numbers, meaning they could flux. There could be some that may decide to. We just don't know that yet, but we can say that the maximum number of students that will be on a bus, which is less capacity than what we normally do, would be no more than 46.
Right, next.
There will be no bus passes for kids to go other places. And, so the 46 students or whatever, if somebody, like, I'm just trying to get an idea, but thank you, Glenn. I know we will talk more.
Yep. Okay.
All right, back to Mr. Desjardins. Guy, you have your audio now?
I hope so.
You do. You're there.
Thank you. And I want to thank April for covered a lot of the questions I have. This is Guy Desjardins. I'm a bus driver. And I do want to thank the committee, the school committee, and everybody that's put in an awful lot of time here in class. This last March, I guess. My question is, a lot of it was covered by April. But I have a couple of questions as far as the drivers. Knowing now that our maximum is going to be 46, is the driver going to have authority to not take a student on the bus? And I'm thinking more of this would probably happen to most of us, like at the middle school, there's so many bus passes. But if you already have 46 passengers on the bus, and you get that 47th student that wants to come on the bus, is the driver going to have the authority to refuse that student on the bus?
So these types of procedural things on how the bus will be is a little bit deeper into things than the overall plan, whether it's a hybrid plan, whether it's 2 days a week or so, which is really discussion as far as whether a 47 student who has not been identified to be on a bus is allowed to get there or not. That'll be something that would be dealt with probably before the run start, but would be part of the bus drivers working with Glenn and superintendent to come up with those things. So I think that those types of questions about specifics like that probably need to be addressed at a different level and not in this particular form.
Yeah, and those are one of the things that drivers can probably get themselves in a bind with administration when it happens on the spot. So I hope that when we do have our meeting at the beginning, and that's at the beginning of the year, that'd be one of my questions that we would ask, because we really need to know that up front. My other question is, and again, I'm really concerned about that number 46. I think 26 is too much, but my question is this, Glenn, I think we talked about this during the ad hoc committee. If the student is screened and is diagnosed with this virus that was on, let's just use my bus, for instance, I'm sure you're going to need all the names of the students that were on the bus. They may need to be quarantined. If the driver has to be quarantined 14 days, are we going to be, or it could be a teacher, it could be anybody, any school employee, are we going to be required to file some sort of stick time to that? Will that come up our burn time? Or are we gonna go without pay for 14 days? You know, we gotta be.
Yeah, but now we're working to the community for discussion of like questions. So my hand is raised.
Guy, we will address the. Yeah, Guy, those are questions we'll address as procedural stuff as far as employees are concerned. Certainly,
Okay.
if you want to get in touch with Glenn and myself, we can talk about that.
Right, yeah, and we could wait for the meeting, I mean, that's, I guess my only concern that the 46 is way too many for us. It just is. Thank you very much.
Thank you. All right, next is Crystal's iPhone.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so I am the mother of a special ed student. I'm Keegan's mom. I'm sure you all know who he is. My concern is, I think I heard you talking about cohort C, where some students will be doing all in-school learning because they classify as somebody who needs to be. How are you choosing who gets to do all in-school learning?
So Kathy mentioned a couple of times that they have 4 criteria that they're going to use a bunch of administrators. It probably is not wise for those 4 criteria to be out because they could be used to identify students, which is against the law. And so.
Okay, so you can't tell us what the criteria is, what you're saying?
I think if you need to know that would have to be a personal conversation with you and maybe Nancy or Kathy, and not out here, just because we would like to protect the confidentiality. We never mention who special ed students are or who any student is that is getting,
Right, and honestly, I appreciate that, and I'm sorry, I'm the mother, so I didn't think that applied to like me talking about it. Okay, my other question is, if you do the hybrid model, I also think I heard you say something about trying to keep siblings on the same, the same, cohort, I guess?
yes, that would be, so if there's more than one student in a household, we would try and put them both in the same cohort A or cohort B, so that every student in that household goes to school on the same days and is doing distant learning on the same days.
Okay. All right, that's all. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
All right, Megan. Your hand is raised. All right, I have an iPhone.
Yes, is that me?
Yes, go ahead.
Yes, my name's Matt. I live in Wales. I have a daughter that's going in kindergarten this year. One of the things that I'm concerned about is that the repercussions, the long-term repercussions of a hybrid or a distance learning will have on our children in the long term. Even the CDC's own website has a published item on there regarding in-school learning and the benefits in terms of social interaction, team building, discussion, thoughts of suicide, things like that. And I just want to make sure that things like that are being considered when we vote on these options across those.
I think you have
What is being discovered, or heard the 64% of parents that would like their kids to go to school full time, and why that 64% can't do full time, and the rest that are either on the fence or prefer distance learning could have that option. Thank you very much.
All right, so all those things are considered. They were a big discussion during the CPT. For people who wanted the remote, it was kind of The big discussion was that we really needed to get the students in, they needed that social interaction and become part of the team. The staff needed to develop a rapport with them and be able to see them. And for the safety of the students, in some respects, it's better for them to be able to come into school and we could see them than for us not to be able to see them. So who knows, maybe after the board makes a decision, if it's a decision on a hybrid, we might have 75% of the students pick out to go remote, in which case the numbers that will be left will be enough that they can go 4 days. We'll have to change everything. But it's not, even if 64% is more than we can physically accommodate in our facilities, that might be more than 64% of the students. So that's, that's kind of that's kind of where it's at. We're gonna have to come up with the best for those who want to opt out and do remote learning or homeschooling if that's their choice. That'll be their option. That allows us to adjust the numbers that we're gonna have on the bus runs and the numbers in the classes, and we'll take a look at what the end result is. But we are concerned about the long-term impact that it would have with students not being in school. That's why we're recommending a hybrid number that gets them in school some. There are some places in the world where students have received their education for their entire life via remote learning techniques and they have developed, but that's unusual, it's not necessary, and we shouldn't have to do it here. We just have to do it for this period of time. So we're gonna do our best to get everybody back when we can, because that's what we want to do.
All right, next, Kelly Heath.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. My question relates to restrictions on traveling. I know at my job, where if we leave the state, we either have to have a negative test to come back to work, or we have to be quarantined for 2 weeks. So my concern is just on during vacations, if families are going out of state and, bringing COVID back with them. So are there gonna be rules around that?
And I think that, the executive orders are out there that say that anybody that travels out to the state and goes to a state with an unacceptable level of COVID-19 must self-quarantine or get tested for negative upon return. So if they have to self-quarantine until they get a test, then they wouldn't be able to come to school. We won't know as a school unit necessarily that they have gone out of state. If somebody gets in a car on the weekend and drives down to Boston, forgets that their season tickets to the Red Sox is no good, and comes back up and doesn't self-quarantine or get a test, we won't know that. So there's thought about it, but there's not a great deal that we are in a position to do anything about if people don't follow the guidelines that are put out there, the executive orders and et cetera, that are out there with the intention of protecting the public.
Right. Karen Bailey.
Hi there.
We lost you, Karen.
Hello?
There you are.
Okay, hi. So my big question is this. It's always been very clear with RSU4 where my children need to be, where their goals need to be in each year to get to where they want to go. My question is, my 7th grader missed kind of half of 7th grade, the way I see it. And yes, she did the remote learning and stuff, but there wasn't a lot of new material there. Does she start 8th grade where they left off in 7th grade? Or are they just starting with 8th grade material? And then, where on the spiral of spiralized learning, where do we start?
I'll let Kathy answer that.
Yeah, so we haven't done our formal assessments since before March 13th. And so when we get our students, we will formally assess our students and meet them where they are at. And then our teachers, again, in June on those PD days, determined the essential standards that students need to have learned in each grade level. And we'll be focusing on those standards first. And so we will identify where the students are and make a plan to make sure that they are meeting the standards on those essential standards. So we will not skip a beat.
Okay, iPhone,
Okay, I think that's me.
that is you.
This is Stephanie. I have a student that goes, well, I have two students that go to Savada's primary. One of the main concerns for us for last year for remote learning was that daycares do not have access to Wi-Fi. And many students go to Miss Gale's preschool and there's no Wi-Fi, and my children will be going there. And I'm just wondering what there is to access for internet so that our students can have access to this, because it's going to be a major concern if we're set up like we were last year with working parents sending their kids to daycare.
You expect that your students or your children will take their laptops to daycare?
Yeah, so my daughter has an iPad, both kids have iPads, and we're just wondering how to get the internet to daycare so that they can complete assignments at daycare, because currently there's no Wi-Fi, so there's no internet available at the daycare.
Okay, so I'll let our tech director, Hygiene, answer that.
Yeah, so as far as locations, that's just like a home, it doesn't have a Wi-Fi, so we follow the same process as kids being at home without Wi-Fi. And so we do have hotspots available for that, and we, evaluate those key zones.
Right, so provide a hotspot there. It's a kind of a tricky one when we do it for a business instead of a home, and that the business can now say we got internet connectivity when it's being paid for by not their expense. So it would be something that we looked at, but we do have the capability of putting some hotspots out there to provide internet connectivity where there isn't any currently. Not anybody can access the hotspot. They have to be an identified machine, I believe, so that they couldn't use their own devices to get on if it's not an RSU4 device.
All right, Yvette Russell.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so I have two kiddos going, one's going into 5th grade and one is going to be going into kindergarten. And I wanted to know how they're going to be graded with the remote learning. I know that back in March, it was pretty laid back. I don't know, I want to know how it's going to be this time and what expectations are the teachers going to have, most especially for my kindergartner. What is he going to, I don't know if he's going to be able to focus on the iPad, doing the remote learning, and I just want to know what expectations he's going to have in order to, move on to 1st grade.
Like Kathy Martin, our director of curriculum, respond.
So all pre-K 12 students will go to our 1 through 4 grading model that we had pre-COVID before March 13th. And again, we'll be looking at those standards and focusing on those. It does not mean that all assignments will be on the iPad. The students will access their assignments on the iPad and might be able to do something. So like a project-based, they might have to make letters with leaves, or there might be all kinds of project and hands-on learning that they do. They might take a picture or make a video and send it back to their teacher. So not everything will be exactly attached to online, especially for our younger learners, but that's how they would access and communicate with their teachers.
Okay.
And again, all grades would be going into jump rope. So if parents want to access, they would see, so pre-K 5, they could get communication through Seesaw. As a parent 3 through 12, you can be invited to your child's Google Classroom and see all those communications and feedback and be part of that loop, as well as you can see your jump rope, we'll see all your child's grades on all the standards.
Okay.
Woody Bailey.
Thank you. Hopefully this will make this quick. So personally, my daughter, first interest is she just wanted to go back to school, and I'm sure that's largely the majority of the, particularly the 64%. When will we find out after this meeting what the plan is, whether it's a hybrid, whether it's back to school, whether it's remote? And I gotta assume that some of us will change our minds on which option we want. I know at the beginning we talked about a homeschool option that is slightly different than a remote learning option that I think you said the remote learning was with like an hour or something with the teacher. And I just, one other thought is, I know at least my daughter, I think probably a lot of other kids, school is about socializing. And if a group of kids learn what the plan is, if they can kind of cluster together and kind of choose the same plan. Just some thoughts on that.
All right, so your first part of your question is, hopefully you will know by the end of this meeting what the plan is going to be, what we are anticipating the first day of school will be and what it will be like. So that's the goal that will come out of our next item of business. However, there are some other things that need to be taken care of, and there is a significant difference between homeschooling and remote learning. And I don't think remote learning restricts you to an hour a week of class time, which gives you class time 5 days a week, and opportunities to meet with your teacher remotely. So, but there's some other questions that have not been asked yet, which I think you might have alluded to, and that is, when will you know which cohort your student is assigned to, and perhaps who their teacher is, those types of things. Those are all being worked on, but I'll let the superintendent give you a better answer than I can.
So Kathy and I, depending on the outcome of tonight, Kathy and I have scheduled a Zoom on Friday at 11 o'clock with community that will be recorded and will answer any of those questions that we can at that time. So, you know, when your kid's gonna know their cohort, when are the bus runs gonna come out, those kind of things. That's our plan, is to answer those questions then on Friday. Tonight's more about getting the framework by which we're going back.
Good. Next week.
Carol.
Hello, Carol from Status. I just have a quick question, actually. I know in the spring, it was hard to keep track of everything with one in middle school, one in high school. Is there a way that we can actually have access to emails also? So when they get an assignment, we can see what's going on. When they get a reply, we can see what's going on. Because that's the toughest thing I have, especially as a high schooler.
So again, everything is done in Google Classroom, and as a parent, you can be invited to be part of that class, which means you would also see the emails. It is all about the notifications and the settings that you put of how much notifications and information you want to get between the student and the teacher. So we will do some parent webinars about how to access Google Classroom as a parent and what notifications are helpful and which ones can become a nuisance of getting 100 emails in a day.
Okay, thank you.
All right, Jennifer?
Hi, we live in Litchfield, and I was just wondering how the whole schedule is going to affect the juniors and seniors with LRTC.
So,
go ahead, Ben.
So we're working on the scheduling with LRTC right now. Like I alluded to before, there's been a struggle to some degree with the regional calendar. So we're working on that. I know Mr. Aliberti has been in constant contact with them. I can't answer it today, but we're hoping to have an answer soon about how that's going to work.
Okay, thank you.
Deb. We can't hear you, Deb.
Yeah, is that better?
That's better. Nope. You're muted again. There you go.
Is that better?
Yes.
Okay, I have two questions. One is dealing with the alternative school program. I haven't heard anything about that mentioned. And the other question I have is if we're doing, part-time going to school and part-time remote learning, how does that affect our sports?
So
Getting kids to and from practice and.
you want me to start?
I can do the alternative.
All right, so Kathy will take alternative and I'll take sports.
So for alternative ed, it would be no different, that students would be picked in cohort A and B, and they already have learning plans and their assignments are already project-based, and so they would just be able to access their teacher to get their instruction on those cohort A or B days, and then do distant learning. That's not to say that a student wouldn't qualify for the cohort C, but we are currently looking at them to either be an A or B.
So as far as sports are concerned, Deb, we don't know what's gonna happen with sports yet. The MPA hasn't come out and said what's gonna happen. I know there's a statewide ADs meeting, I think tomorrow maybe. So until we actually know there are gonna be fall sports, I can't tell you what that's gonna look like.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. You guys are doing a great job.
Katie?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you for all your hard work, all the planning that went into this. It seems to me that we're voting tonight on the hybrid or the pure virtual model. And the hybrid definitely gives a lot of, we can mold the model as we go. My question is for the RISE program under the hybrid model. Can you speak a little bit more to that process? Would the teachers be solely doing the online learning, or would they still be managing a classroom?
So we don't know exactly who's going to be teaching that currently. I am working with a bunch of other districts to put students in cohorts as well, to make sure our capacity is okay. It just depends on how many students we have. So we're not going to say Mrs. Martin is a RISE teacher, but we might be able to do that depending on our numbers. So it is not going to be like a placement, like a regular, if you were cohort A, B, to get a specific assigned teacher. But you would end up with a regular one. We're just not sure who that would be. We are looking to do pods like pre-K2 and give project-based assignments. We would also have access to our regular curriculum and materials.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Okay, so again, more questions. We've got some chats, so we'll look at the chats and see what the comments are in the chat.
Some of these, a good portion of these are answered already. So the first one is, will students be assigned to cohorts, or will parents be able to pick which one? I can answer that. We will be assigning cohorts based upon a bunch of different things. Parents will have the choice of choosing cohort B if they so choose. And then virtual schooling, has anyone said what virtual schooling will look like? Will it follow the actual classroom model with teachers appearing in front of the class for each class?
It's going to depend on the grade level. So for pre-K5, they don't necessarily have periods, but for like a high school, we did find it successful to have the different periods where students would either access or be working on their assignments during that time frame. So it just depends on what age your learner is.
Okay, I guess the other ones have been answered as they came in.
So there was one more.
One more?
That just came in. Just a thought, pushing out to the 14th will also help us get through the 2-week period after a major holiday.
But I thought people ending summer, coming back into town 2 weeks after.
Yeah.
But it's the 7th, Monday the 7th.
Yes,
Yeah, I think it's the 7th.
it is.
So taking the 14th is 7 days instead of going back on the 8th.
Right.
Or the Friday before, and then everybody takes off again.
Right.
So are there any more in the community that need to raise their hand, or I shouldn't say need, but want to raise their hand now Okay, we got a couple of new chats.
And I also have a comment, I'm not on Zoom, I have to call in to make that one up then. But in the middle of the meeting,
Right there.
so you can let me know when it's the time to be.
Go ahead.
Go ahead now.
So my name is Christy Willett, I'm from Litchfield. I have a kindergarten student at Little Treasure and a first grader from Cherry River. And I have two questions. My first question is, has there been any consideration of an outdoor classroom in using care funding to be able to create safe outdoor classrooms for students to be distanced?
So one of the things that we've talked about with staff is the ability to take kids outside. We aren't set up for outdoor classrooms per se, but we are encouraging staff to get outside with kids. It's depending on the weather, of course.
And your second question?
Great, thank you. And my second question, thank you. My second question is around the hybrid model. Kathy, I think you alluded to it a little bit in terms of when they are not in school, will it be synchronous or asynchronous?
Yeah, so again, I think it's going to depend on the grade level of your learner. But I think there's going to be a combination. So we're thinking maybe on Wednesday that there might be some synchronous where you could have a social emotional Zoom meeting where cohort A and B get together. There might be times where your child actually is connected to an ed tech for RTI, or they might have a Zoom for a GT class. So it really depends on your own particular child if they will have a synchronous class or not. But in general, if you are cohort A on Monday and Tuesday, you will have asynchronous learning on Thursday, Friday. It would be, unless it was a particular content area that you would be needing to have synchronous. So we're really shooting for asynchronous on Thursday, Friday, and maybe one or two on Wednesday.
Great, thank you so much.
Let's see. All right, let's see. With remote learning, will there still be vacation weeks? Yes, there will.
Yeah, still vacation.
Kept my daughter back a year. My fear is she still won't be able to caught up with a hybrid. What will it look like for kids of mine who are struggling and have an IEP in place? So I can answer that. IEP services will be had. We have a legal requirement to provide those. We will continue to provide those. Let's see. As a parent that works 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. and doesn't get home from work until 5:30, will we have the option to complete assignments in the evening? My daughter will be attending daycare and made it clear they are not teachers and it isn't their job to make sure classwork is done.
Yeah, so no assignment. Again, you would be working with a teacher, and it sounds like it would be daycare, so it would be a younger learner. They're not going to have assignments that are due every day. They might have them due. You have a couple of days to do them. So if I'm cohort A, for example, I'm in class 8, Monday and Tuesday, I get assignments for Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, they would be due Monday. So you have flexibility as a family to get done, but you would also have time to check in with the teachers on particular office hours as well.
With remote learning, would there still be snow days? That's a very good question. I'd like to say no. We're waiting on some guidance from the state. So part of what makes a student day is a lunch in 3 hours.
No, not if it's all remote.
Well, not if it's all remote, right? But depending on if we're all remote, then if we can deliver a lunch. Then it really depends on.
When do you need to do that? Because you're all remote, you're not delivering unless you have to anyway. We haven't discussed that. We probably will try, but that's not a criteria for remote learning.
Just hope for all snow days on Wednesday.
Wednesdays. We're hoping for snow days.
Okay, so we have no more input coming in from the community. Are there any follow-up questions or comments from board members before we move to the next? Okay, seeing none, I want to thank everybody in the community for listening to the presentation. There was a lot of good questions. I hope we were able to answer all of them. I know we probably couldn't answer them all satisfactorily the way you wanted them, but you got answers that will give you more information in order to base your decisions. So at this time, like to have a motion to approve the return to school plan presented by the administration.
So moved.
Been moved and seconded. Joan and Joe. Discussion. Okay, so I would like that to have an amendment to give us a start date. Bobby?
Yeah, I would say if Lewison's gonna start the 14th, and that would give us a little bit more time to put
So your minute to start on the 14th?
on the 14th,
Now you have discussion on it.
Yeah, 14th, yeah.
Is there a second to that amendment? Been second.
Now, wait a minute. The next one, it says to approve a change to the 2020-21 school calendar. Wouldn't that, take in the beginning of school?
It could, but if we put it all in the plan, it's in the plan. I guess I didn't see the next one. I was just trying to get it all in, as I had mentioned earlier, that when we had the plan, we'd also come up with a date. So there's probably other changes to the school calendar that's gonna be driven than just the start date of the school. There's gonna be teacher workshop days and things like that are on the calendar that also are gonna get modified as a result.
I actually like the idea of starting 2 weeks after the holiday weekend because it gives people who are coming back from out of state the 2 weeks. Is that the 14th? I'm sorry, I don't.
No, that would be,
right?
That would be the 21st.
It'd be the 21st.
It would be 2 weeks.
Yeah, the 21st would be 2 weeks.
Oh, yeah.
It kind of gets us out of the thing, but I hear what you're saying, that this is discussion under an amendment to make the start date the 14th. Other comments?
So in this motion, this is a motion to approve the hybrid plan, correct?
The plan presented by administration, the hybrid, which is the plan you presented.
Okay, fair enough.
Okay, with an amendment to start on the 14th. Any other discussion on the amendment?
Is it safe to assume?
Get closer.
Is it safe to assume, although I don't like to use that word, that if something comes up that an emergency meeting will be called? Okay, thank you.
Yes, without question.
Okay.
We've already talked about it.
Okay, I have another question, and I don't know if this is where it needs to go or under the school calendar, but being a teacher in Lewiston, my start date is still August 24th, because now I have 3 weeks of professional development to get me ready to know what to do with my students. So I'm a little bit concerned that as we push the student date out, are we pushing the teacher date?
We have contracted days in the collective bargaining agreement. We would look at the teacher calendar and adjust that accordingly.
Because my calendar didn't adjust, but now it's giving me more time to get ready for what my expectations are.
You got it.
And I think that's easier for us to do with a 14th date than a 21st date.
Yes, yes, I agree.
Any other discussion? So seeing none.
Yeah, I really, sorry, hold on a minute. I really like the hybrid plan. I think you guys put a lot of thought into it. I'm just so stuck on the transportation of getting these kids to school. I can't get over that part. So is that like a discussion that we have now, or like, are we passing the hybrid plan and not talking about the transportation and figuring it out later? Because that's a really important part of it.
Right, so right now, we're basically just voting on making the motion to add the start date of the 14th. Then when we get to the discussion of the plan, that's when any board member that has further questions or wants to recommend a change to the plan, that can be done. And we won't have to take each suggestion as an amendment. If people have suggestions to change the plan, we can address those as we go along and then finalize what it will be like in the end, I guess. Since we're gonna get that all done under discussion.
We're doing the amendment.
So we're doing the amendment, so there's no other discussion on moving this, making the motion to read the plan presented by the administration with school start date being on the 14th of September. So all those in favor?
Right.
Wait.
I'm sorry. I just wanted to procedurally make sure I'm listening. So voting on the amendment, you just talked about amending his plan. If you vote on the whole thing, it would approve the plan without.
No, we gotta deal with the amendment.
Okay,
The
good. So
amendment is
just
just
the
to add the starting date of the 14th.
Yeah. That's all.
Okay, so all those in favor of adding the starting date to be the 14th of September? That's everybody here, and the 3 board members?
Andrea?
Yeah, sorry about that, what?
Are you okay?
I'm my unmute button for a minute.
So are you in,
I'm sorry, Andy, can you say that again?
yeah, so we're voting on amendment which would add the start date to be the 14th of September. Are you in favor of the start date being?
Yeah, that's fine with me. I see a lot of the parent comments over here saying that they're good with the 14th, so I think that let's go with the 14th.
Okay, Dory? Joan?
Yes.
Motion carries. The amendment carries.
The amendment there. All right. So now let's discuss the administrator's plan, administration plan, as it was presented. So Andrea, this would be a place where you could go and talk about your concerns with the part of the plan that dealt with the busing. It was as they presented it.
We talked about it.
Yeah, it's not,
Yeah, I mean, I just wanna, I mean, there were a lot of things brought up about the social distancing, the capacity. We've had a couple bus drivers who have also voiced their concern. We've had, the representative of the Teachers Association. So, I share their concern. I really, really do. And I want to make sure that because we have such a high number of students being transported to the school, that we're making that safe, like all aspects of school. You know what I mean? There's the point of doing all of this work to make school safe in-house, but we're not really going to pay that much attention to how we're getting them there. It just doesn't make sense to me, and I appreciate all of the work that everybody has done. I mean, I don't think that it's for lack of trying or trying to create a plan. I think you guys worked really hard, but I just think there's too many variables for the transportation for me. So that's just how I feel. I mean, if we can overcome those, that's great. I think that supplies are also, I think the supplies are also a little, cumbersome. And so that's just where I'm at.
okay, appreciate that. Other comments?
We're within CDC guidelines, if you want to see, correct?
My connection just dropped out.
We've got you
But I
back.
got it back.
So the CDC guide, so it depends on which CDC. You've got the national CDC, you've got the main CDC. Main CDC's guidelines are what's in the DOE framework now. And basically it is, it's not recommended to fill a bus to its capacity. That's what it is. And so we've kind of looked at, and I don't disagree with anybody that the whole idea of we've got a social distance, 3 feet with masks inside the, I don't know. I'm not a doctor. I'm not a, I wasn't involved in developing the DOE framework. So I don't know where those thought processes come from, but that's currently what's in the DOE framework. So.
I guess my question is that so they can cover themselves if you put siblings in a seat together?
Mm-hmm.
And now you don't really need a social distance with siblings?
Right. We would do that, for sure. Yeah.
Because I'm concerned about that too. I don't know why we're going through all of this to keep them distant in the school. But some of those kids are on the bus for an hour. And that's a long ride to be sitting with another kid. And they come to school and now you can't be that close to that child anymore. I don't know how some of our little ones are going to make that distinguishable. I can sit with them on the bus that close, but no, I can't be that close to them on the playground or in the school building.
Or if they're getting on and off the bus
at daycare together.
Right.
You know, they're not siblings, but in theory, they're spending all their time together.
Well, and I kind of feel that way about my own son. He's got a group of 5 kids.
Right.
They've been together all summer.
Yep.
Now I'm thinking they'll probably be different cohorts because they're probably different classes. But as a parent, I wouldn't have a problem with being in close proximity with them because those kids have been doing that like siblings would all summer.
Yep.
That's where the cohort A, B comes in, you get the group all together, spending those 2 days together.
Yeah, I don't know if your mic's turned on or not, but maybe, but, right. To the best that we can try and get a group, maybe those 5 boys all, or students all live together, or maybe they're kind of spaced out and they ride the bike to get back and forth either. So it's really going to be a difficult task. If we could have only 1 student per seat, it would be impossible. We couldn't do it. We'd have to go remote because we just couldn't. The transportation would be 4 hours in the morning, 4 hours in the afternoon. Just couldn't make it happen. And that might be part of the rationale, although that's not a good reason for it, but being a rural state, a lot of students ride buses from great distances. And that could force nobody to have in-person learning, even though they didn't have a single case in the county, which is not the case anymore, but that could limit it. But yeah, it is an interesting point. So I think we're gonna have the transportation issue. We're gonna have to work on that and do the best we can. All of this could change at any time. We can get further direction, in which case we're really doing a plan going to this hybrid that was presented model, how the transportation is gonna work. It's gonna have to get worked out, just like many other aspects still. Others, questions, comments, modifications? I'm not seeing any. You got any on the, Andrea, Dory, Joan?
I am still uncomfortable.
Uncomfortable with which parts of it, Dory?
Sitting 2 kids next to each other on a full bus. You're asking for trouble.
Okay.
That's all.
Yeah, I hear you.
And we in Maine have been very fortunate so far. All I'm saying.
I appreciate it. Yeah, it's good input. I hear you. All right. Any other comments? If not, I'll call for the vote. Yeah, Robbie?
Yeah, I'd just like to say that no plan that we come up with is gonna be perfect. And this plan will only be as strong and as weak as the community wants it to be. So I would hope that we would all grab onto this rope that we really don't have control of and everybody pull the same way. And I think if we can do that as a community, we'll be a lot better off. And modeling for your kids on how you feel about education and the situations that they're going into at school is a big help for the teachers, the staff, and eventually the community. So let's all get together and do the best we can.
And it's a very good comment, because a real key to this whole thing is going to be that parental assessment that they're supposed to do every morning before they let that student go out and get on the bus. Did they run a fever? Did they have a cough? Oh, did they go and visit Aunt Charlie over the weekend? Or Uncle Charlie over the weekend? Could be either one, I guess.
Yeah.
And who has COLA or something. So, and if those are the case, that they don't send them to school. They don't put them on the bus. They don't expose their classmates. They don't expose their teachers. They don't expose all the community members that the tracing would track down. So we have to rely, the staff is going to self-assess each day. We will have that documentation. Parents are going to have to self-assess each day. their students, we will not have documentation, we just have to rely that they did that. We can't do it at the bus. When kindergartners out there waiting on the bus driver says they got a fever, or the kid starts coughing, the bus driver can't just leave, stand beside the road, there might not be anybody at home, it might be out on the bus stop waiting along with a sibling or the next door neighbor's kid who gets on the bus. So it's really up to the parents to be involved and to get it done. So there's nothing else about the plan, then I will call for the vote. So we'll do a roll call vote because we have the three there. They're online, and we'll just go down.
Jen,
Yes.
Robbie,
Yes.
Stephanie,
Yeah.
Bob,
Yes.
Vicky,
Yes.
Joe,
Yes.
Andrea,
Maybe last. I'm so on the phone. Sorry.
all right,
Thanks, Andrea, I'm last.
Joan,
Yes.
all right, Andrea,
All right, yes.
and Dory.
Yes, reluctantly.
Okay, so the motion carries with the amendment.
To start, accept the plan, the hybrid plan as presented, with the start date of September 14th. Okay? Thank you for all. I know it's past 9 and we can't start any business unless the board approves it. We do have a few things of first readings of policies. So before I ask if somebody wants to make a motion to allow us to continue with business or not, is there anybody that have any real problems with any of these? So that we can just let them go and get the first reading next time?
Yeah.
All right? Okay, I think there's no committee reports, there's no executive session, no other business. Before I adjourn the meeting, I want to thank you all. It's not been easy. I know it hasn't been easy for me. I can't expect it was easy for any of you either. So you have the information that you have, community members have it. There's going to be a Zoom meeting for the community on Friday to go and discuss some more things. Communications is the key. Again, thank you, and you all have a good night. Now, without objection, we'll declare this meeting adjourned.
9:13. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Good night.
everybody, thank
Good night.
everybody that zoomed in or called in or listened. Appreciate it.
Let's do the top of my.
Okay, goodbye, everybody.
Good night, Joan.
Good night.
Good night, Dory. Good night,
Bye,
Andrea.
Dory. Bye, Andrea.
Nope, right here. Don't mind.